Okay, here's the lecture that I promised you on diversity. This is chapter 9 in the medical legal book. So, diversity defined. So, it is a difference that may be rooted in culture, age, experience, health status, gender, sexual orientation, racial identity, mental abilities, or other aspects of social, cultural, organization, social economic position. So, it's pretty big. It covers everything. So you will have to be well versed in this definition. So make sure you know that it includes everybody, basically. Issues in diversity may be divided into primary and secondary dimensions. So the primary include physical and mental health, sexual orientation, age, ethnicity, and gender. Whereas the second dimensions include income, marital status, geographic location, education, and religion. So the primary is stuff that typically you can't control, whereas the secondary is basically your social economic status. So adaptation of resources for people of all backgrounds is termed multiculturalism. So all of the variables defined in the issues relating to diversity also must be considered in a discussion of multiculturalism. So the interaction patterns. So interaction patterns labeled isms because of their common word ending. So each ism involves a tendency to judge. So we typically should not use any kind of ism. So racism, sexism, social centrism, classism, ageism. There's a million isms. When we do that, we are in a way categorizing people when we really should not be doing that. So try to stay away from any kind of ism. So with diversity in values, so each group and individuals must manage the same basic requirements of living to survive and thrive. To do so, they usually choose and follow a set of values. So universal values, and they depend on where you're from. So it really is impacted by your upbringing also. So the orientation towards nature, including the supernatural. So do you believe in God? Are you Muslim? Are you Islamic? Are you Catholic? Are you Christian? So do you believe in Martians? So also in time, the activity, relationships with other people, and the nature of mankind. So kind of as a culture, Americans are known to be loud and rude. So there you go. The Institute of Medicine reports, so the United States is rapidly becoming more diverse nation. So the non-white racial and ethnic groups will constitute a majority of the American population later in the century. So the white general WASP human here in the United States is the minority now, which is awesome actually, but it's very, very diverse here in the United States. So groups are working to increase the preparation and motivation of the underrepresented minority students, especially here on campus. We have really focused in on that minority student and trying to get them up to the level so that they can succeed within college. And we're trying to get them into healthcare fields. So the education programs like us, we're focusing on racially, culturally, and economically diverse populations in an effort to improve the distribution and retention of healthcare workforce. We want the workforce to mirror the population. So especially here in San Diego, we're considered a transient city. So we have people coming and going all the time with all backgrounds. Very, very diverse, very, very cool. But we want the healthcare field to mirror that. So cultural competency. It's a set of behaviors, attitudes, policies coming together in a system or agency or among professionals that enables effective interactions in a cross-cultural framework. So when you have good cultural competency, everyone's working together really well. There's no discrimination. There's just a really good cohesive group. The linguistic competency provides readily available, culturally appropriate oral and written language services to patients with limited English proficiency. We have translators, we have trained medical interpreters. There's now access for any language interpretation in medical facilities. So language is probably the most significant barrier to cultural competency, and we're doing everything we can to link that so it's not. So controversy surrounds cultural competency policies and practices. Opponents of adopting these policies vocalize the opinion that the United States is an English-speaking country, and those who immigrate should learn and adapt. I think that's really funny because, wow, the United States has never officially adopted a language at a national level. So depending on the state, so like Texas and Florida, California, we have adopted the languages that are most spoken. So New Mexico, California, we view Spanish as part of our normal language here. So depending on where you're at, on what language is being adapted. So it's done at a state level, not at a national level. The national level has never decided on a language of America. So people are very, very passionate about that though, so don't bring it up. All right. Professionals mandate regarding discrimination and cultural diversity. So non-discrimination in the practice of radiology. So the ASRT supports non-discrimination in the practice of radiographic science and the performance of all procedures and patient care within the scope. So that's your society telling you that you have to treat everyone. So the ASRT endorses culturally competent healthcare education beginning in the entry-level curriculum and considers continued cultural competency education necessary for RADT. So we teach you here, obviously in your first semester, to be culturally competent and diverse and to treat everyone well and with respect. So you need to provide translators if needed. So there's federal mandates also regarding linguistic and cultural diversity. So Congress created the Office of Minority Health in 1994. So the OMH is required to develop these abilities of healthcare professionals to address linguistic and cultural barriers to healthcare and increase access to healthcare services for limited English proficiency individuals. So basically what it means is that if you do not provide a resource for people for translation, you can lose your federal funding. So your federal financial aid provides meaningful access to LEP applicants and recipients. So in all the hospitals, you'll notice that there is a translation service, whether it's a phone it has two phones and it connects to someone on the other end that speaks the language fluently. So I'd explain what I want, the translator to say, and they'd say it to the person in their native language. So issues concerning cultural and linguistic competencies. So using family members to interpret. This causes major problems. If they don't want grandma to know that she has a tumor, they're not going to tell grandma she has a tumor. If they want her to have the procedure done, they're not going to tell her everything about it or the complications of it or whatever. So we found that the family members, or they didn't know the word for, pancreatic tumor, so they would use something other than, what it really was. So it caused all kinds of problems. So we do not allow family members to translate medical because they're not trained in medical. So misconceptions involving cultural customs can have serious implications also. So the Institute of Medicine report, JCAHO, JACO, guidelines in the new ASRT curriculum and other states and federal mandates require linguistic and cultural competency training. So I'm going to give you your training, and in the hospitals you'll get your training also. So multilingual technologists will have a competitive edge out in the job field because they understand the culture, typically the native language that they're speaking, or the second language, third language, fourth language, and they'll be able to translate. So typically they make more money and they're in higher demand. Discrimination. All right. So we've all heard of discrimination, and there are many laws and organizations that prohibit discrimination on the basis of race, gender, age, national origin, religion, and disabilities. So employment discrimination claims are based on statutes. So disparate treatment cases, where the discrimination case involving the situation in which the employee feels that they have been treated differently than similarly employed individuals. There's disparate impact cases, where discrimination cases involve situations in which the employee feels that the employer's policy had an unfair impact on employees belonging to a protected class. So prima facie, I've heard that pronounced different ways, facie or facie case. So what must be provided by a complainant making a claim of employment discrimination? So this is what they have to do. The prima facie case requires the complainant to prove they belong to a protected class, where protected class were qualified for the position and were not hired or were discharged, and that after their discharge, the employer continued to look for an individual with the complainant's qualifications to fill the position, or hire an individual less qualified than the complainant who was not a member of the protected class. So, interesting. Sexual harassment. We all know about this. So any unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal and physical conduct of a sexual nature to which the employee is required to submit as a term or a condition of employment. So submission to or rejection of such conduct is used as the basis for employment decisions, or such conduct has a purpose or effect of unreasonable interfering with the individual's work performance or creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. So you have to be very, very careful with this. Even touching someone on the shoulder, someone can view as a sexual advance. So you need to be very careful. Don't touch people. Let them know when you're going to be touching them, especially patients. All right, so actions of the nature mentioned previously are considered sexual harassment when submission to such conduct is made either explicitly or implicitly a term or condition of an individual's employment. Submission or rejection of such conduct by an individual is used as the basis for employment decisions affecting such individuals. Such conduct has the purpose or effect of unreasonably interfering with the individual's work performance or creating intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. So there's two different types of sexual harassment. There's the quid pro quo, which is asserts that an initial or continued employment or advancement depends on sexual conduct. So the other is a hostile work environment. So sexual harassment claims argue that the harassment unreasonably interfered with the employee's work performance or created an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. So very interesting there on that. And there's a case study that I wanted to read to you real quick with that. So in order to make a claim for a hostile work environment, sexual harassment, the complainant must first establish the prima facie case. So, all right, so here's the imaging scenario. A male technologist is hired to perform a computed tomography, was hired to perform CT by the female director of radiology. The director, as early as the interview, hints to the applicant that she is romantically available and thinks he's attractive. Throughout his first few months of employment, the director pays special attention to him and continues to hint at her availability. The technologist lets the director know that he is currently seeing someone and even introduce his significant other to the director when she comes in to meet him for lunch. Over the next year, the director continues to pay special attention to the technologist, making comments about his attractiveness, and even states that she would like to get together with him. The technologist laughs off these comments as best as he can. The position for supervisor of CT opens. The director approaches the male technologist, informs him that the position is his if he'll become intimate with her. So, question is this sexual harassment? Clearly. And what do you think as far as that goes? So this is a quid pro quo sexual harassment, clearly clear-cut case. The advancements, the advancement of the technologies depends on the sexual conduct and demand is made by the supervisor. So that supervisor can be in a lot of trouble. Make sure that if you even see anything like that, you can report it so that person is protected. All right, so sexual harassment as it concerns to employees and students. Who is protected? Both men and women. Harassing conduct towards homosexuals and heterosexual individuals is prohibited also. So what is unwelcome? So the conduct must be unwanted and offensive to be prohibited. Generally, courts must find that the complainant made some effort to indicate that the conduct was unwelcome or offensive. So if someone just complains of sexual harassment but has never told the person, you need to stop, this is not welcome, I'm uncomfortable with this. If they've made no effort, then the courts have been known to throw it out. So harassment arising because of a person's sexual preference is not protected under the sexual harassment statutes because it's not based on gender. So that's a little interesting little tidbit right there. The determination of whether conduct is sufficiently hostile or abusive to be actionable must be determined in the light of all circumstances of the employment relationship. All right, so employers are liable, believe it or not. If you go to your supervisor and complain that someone is sexually harassing you or harassing you in any way, the employer is liable. They need to act upon that to ensure that you are not in a hostile work environment. So employers are liable for any quid pro quo sexual harassment in their supervisory. So a hostile work environment cases are not as clear. So harassment in the workplace by coworkers may also create liability for the employer if the employer or supervisory personnel knew that this was happening and failed to respond. So healthcare facilities should have policies to inform employees of conduct constituting sexual harassment. You can also go to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and it gives employers trains them on how to prevent sexual harassment. If employers become aware of potential sexual harassment, they must take prompt and adequate remediation action towards that employee, and it's grounds for termination. So typically it stops, sometimes it doesn't. The healthcare facilities policies and procedures should clearly specify whom reports of sexual harassment should be made and the correct procedure to follow. A person who feels sexually harassed has a right to file a complaint with the Civil Rights Commission and the EEOC. So if you're being sexually harassed or harassed in your workplace, you have a right to file. If your employer ignores it and doesn't take action, then you can file with these two and you can file a suit against them. So anti-discrimination statutes in patient treatment situations. So the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, it's called EMTALA, E-M-T-L-A, EMTALA. It requires hospitals covered by its provision to provide emergency medical screening examinations and treatments to stabilize seriously medical situations. So what had happened that this came into play is that before EMTALA, people would be in an ambulance and they're on their en route, and the hospital asked what kind of insurance they had, and if they didn't have insurance, they reroute them to a county facility. So if you're receiving federal money, you have to accept all patients that are in a medical emergency. So this EMTALA, so the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, requires that they treat the patient whether or not they have insurance, they stabilize the patient, and then they can go from there. They can transfer the patient out or whatever is needed. If the patient states that they want to stay at that hospital, then that's their choice. They can't transfer the patient. And the hospital that they're going to transfer the patient to has to agree to accept that patient. So the EMTALA is very sticky. And that's why when you go into the ER to go shoot a portable or whatever on a patient and they don't have any information on the patient, that's where EMTALAs come into play. So normally they just reroute them to a county facility. Now they can't do that. They have to accept the patient. So imaging professionals are bound by the ethical duty. So there's three principles for the ASRT Code of Ethics. So deliver patient care and services unrestricted by concerns of physical attributes or the nature of the disease or illness, and without discrimination regarding sex, race, creed, religion, or socioeconomical status. So the American Disability Act is more explicitly addresses persons with HIV and AIDS and identifies more specific duties for providers. All right, so that is your lecture there, and what I'll do is I'll put a quiz up so you guys can get your first 10 points. Very exciting.